And a very good morning to you. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 6 o'clock this Tuesday, the 4th of July. It's me, James Max, with you till 6:30 here on Talk, where we're live from the news building here in London. Still to come, we turn our attention to the papers. Going to be joined by a broadcaster based in Slovakia. That's Eric Wiltsher. We'll be going through the front pages and also the stories that he's picked out, including a bun fight that Greg seems to want to have, cricket fans, they appear to mock Lords members, so we'll be finding out what's been happening there. We'll talk about the Ukrainian hammer back on the front line. Marvel superheroes transformed. It's an odd story. And also some comments from the Bank of England that might make you angry. So all of those stories are still to come, but also this morning, as motorists have been used as a cash cow, so it says, by grocers, and banks have been accused of profiteering on rates. I want to know from you, how are you being ripped off? Let's turn to the papers. Joining me this morning, Eric Wiltsher, broadcaster based in Slovakia. Eric, morning.
Morning, Matt. James, how are you?
You nearly got it wrong. I'm good, thank you very much. All is well. So what are prices based, you're in Slovakia. Have you seen the mass inflation that we've seen here and the rip-offs by whether it's supermarkets or indeed anybody else?
Yeah, the current inflation, James, is 13.5%.
Oh.
13.5%.
So it makes our inflation look as if Rishi Sunak almost knows what he's doing.
Well, I'm not going to say whether he does or he doesn't, but the bottom line is that's our inflation rate at the moment. And the shop prices, I mean, I think we spoke about this before. I went into a supermarket, German-owned, and cucumbers had trebled in price.
Right.
Trebled in price. So I just didn't bother. I really didn't. And a lot of the other products that you would normally expect to pay a couple of euros for, you can expect to pay €5 or €6 for these days.
Gosh.
And so it isn't, and I have to say to your viewers and listeners that whilst I see a lot of grimacing about inflation in the UK and pricing, when you look at here, bearing in mind the price index is completely different to the UK, but equally the minimum wage is incredibly low compared to the UK. So there is a relevance there anyway. And to give you a clue, somebody around 60 years old, minimum wage, €600 a month.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it is food for thought, and it's certainly one of those things where we have a look at. Sometimes we forget that we need to look around and realise that. I mean, when people blame it on Brexit and they blame all these other things, it's like, do you really know what's going on around Europe? It's exactly the same. And frankly, in some cases, it's worse. And have a look in France. Where does all that... can we blame Brexit for the fact that the French are rioting? Can we blame Brexit for the fact that migrants are turning up in Italian and Greek beaches? Can we blame Brexit for the fact that food inflation in Germany is over 20%?
Absolutely not, James.
Exactly. Now, Daily Telegraph, motorist users fuel cash cow by grocers. We've been talking about that story, but also they've got a picture of Novak Djokovic. She's on the front page of the papers. They were using blowers to make courts nice and dry on the Wimbledon first day, but also the majority of high street banks are members of diversity schemes run by the charity Stonewall, according to the Daily Telegraph. Lenders are facing questions over their links to the charity amid a backlash over the bank account closures of those with gender critical views. So we will turn our attention, I'm sure, to that. Meanwhile, the Financial Times, bank chiefs called in by Watchdog to answer claims of profiteering on rates. So we've been discussing this, Eric. We've got two stories where big companies are being accused of using their market position to almost sort of run a bit of a racket. I'm assuming that, at some point, the regulator or government has to step in or step up.
Well, they've got to at some point, because if you look at the fuel, which is what you're referring to in many cases, the fuel costs are up and down like a yo-yo. It's the international market, and the international market fluctuates like crazy. But what you're not seeing is as the price comes down, you're not seeing that reflected in pump prices. And
they would argue that two things. First of all, they forward buy their fuel. So if prices are coming down, it takes a while for it to come to the pumps, and that I understand. But they would also say that they've had to put up their wages, rents have gone up, council tax and other taxes have gone up. So therefore, in order to maintain the same margin, it means that they have to charge slightly different prices. That's what they would say.
Well, that's what they were saying in some of the reports, that they've had to increase the margin to cover the on costs of everything else at the fuel service areas. Now, I get that.
But then what do you make of this? What do you make of this, though? The Eye says 67% of public want a cap on supermarket prices to help the cost of living. As soon as you start to end up with the government capping prices, you're in a disaster area. It's the slippery slope down. It's never going to work, because the minute you put... it's like anything where the government controls something. The minute they control it, you lose everything in the economy. You lose the opportunity for the consumer to gain, because there's great competition between the supermarkets. So the answer then is increased competition, not regulation and price caps. Because also we saw what happened with the energy price cap. It was a stupid idea. The government decided, let's nick Labour's policy. They nicked Labour's policy, which was written by Ed Miliband, who, look, he's a clever guy, sadly misguided, and on pretty much everything. And so this policy then led to, in fact, energy price inflation. It was the most stupid and daft decision taken by this government to introduce a price cap. It then became a sort of a whipping instrument for all of us, and has led to the collapse and pain within the energy markets as well. Instead of the government doing what they should have done, which is to disconnect the prices of different fuels. If the government want us to use different fuels like wind energy or solar or hydro or whatever, make them different prices so that we can buy it in, and then when it's run out, it's run out. I mean, genuinely, I don't understand.
It's either a stick or a carrot. Now, currently, we're just using a stick for just about everything. If you put a carrot in front of people and say, if you use this, you will save Mother Earth XYZ, and by doing so, you will also save yourself a lot of money. And I remember vividly, a few years ago, I was interviewing a guy from one of the green organisations, and he was the most logical one I've ever come across, because he said, look, don't think of it as saving the planet. Think of it as saving your wallet.
Well, it's either saving your wallet, but the thing is also, when people talk about saving the planet, it's not saving the planet, it's because people are worried about humanity. The planet will be fine, thank you very much indeed. Meanwhile, Celia Walden has written a feature piece in The Telegraph, which is quite interesting. Gen Z want anyone over 30 to be a walking apology for the past. I mean, she's absolutely spot on. Spot on. It's a great article. Well done, Cecilia. Very funny. Now, the Times front page. Ailing NHS has made us sicker, says Javid, ex-Health Secretary, calls for a Royal Commission, but also compare the forecourt. Petrol price checker to swerve profiteers, and a picture
Can I just jump in on that headline? Because the ailing NHS has two things. One of which is it's a complete bloatware place. It's over-managed. There's too many people doing the wrong things. But equally, what happened to the days when you and I were youngsters, and if we banged our thumb with a hammer, we would probably go and get a plaster from a chemist, or we'd get some cream to get rid of the spot on the back of your neck. We've got to get used to using the pharmacies and secondly the GPs and then the NHS, and take away a lot of the legwork from the doctors and nurses who are looking after things that don't need looking after in a hospital.
Well, I think that's, if you go to any pharmacy across Europe, they tend to do far more of that in the pharmacy, as you say. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail front page, banks face probe into chilling account closures. Banks are facing a Treasury investigation into claims they're closing customers' accounts because they don't like their views on controversial topics. So that's that story there. The Guardian leads on Labour wants graduate-led nurseries to fight inequality. But also, June was hottest on record, according to the Met Office. Across the month, the country recorded recorded an average mean temperature of 15.8 degrees Celsius, beating the previous record of 14.9 degrees Celsius recorded in 1940 and 1976. To my mind, the only thing that we should be worried about is if it's next year and the year after and the year after that. If we have a hot June, well, we had a hot June. We had them, as it says here, back in 1940 and 1976. So,
and in 1963, I was stuck in a village for 2 weeks because the snow was too much to get a snowplough through.
Wow.
In Bedfordshire, that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Back in that time, you had the Fens in East Anglia where they used to go speed skating and have tournaments. We don't have that anymore.
Well, no.
It's just...
global warming and all that. Meanwhile, the Star leads on. Boffin warns of nasty downside to a bad diet. Honey will shrunk the brains. Humanity is facing a total wipeout as our brains get smaller and smaller thanks to eating a bad diet. Turkey Twizzler, anyone, they say. That's the Daily Star. The Daily Mirror, £900 million fuel rip-off is what they say. Big Ford charge motorists an extra 6p a litre to boost the profits. Meanwhile, the Daily Express focuses on Tory split over new tough rules for migrants, and they've got a picture of Andy Murray on the front page there. Flaming June, it's official, the hottest on record, and it's all down to climate change, says the Met Office.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm sure the climate is changing, by the way. I don't sort of have some weird flat earth sort of view to it, but...
I don't, James, but the thing is, if you look back over the centuries, temperature went like this. It went up and down and up and down and up and down.
I know.
And it always happens.
We're being fed all this stuff, and then, well, exactly, and some of the things we're being asked to do are just nonsense. Eric, I'll come back to you in a mo with your stories. Meanwhile, Eric Wiltsher has been going through the papers. And let's start with a story about, Greggs.
I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of any type of shop like that, but when it comes to the Cornish thing, which is the problem that's raised its ugly head at the moment, how can Greggs compete? They shouldn't be competing with the proper Cornish pasty. It's made by real people, specialist bakers. We should all support the small shops, because the minute they go away, you go,
I do agree about shopping local. I have never been a particular Greggs fan, in the sense that I think I've eaten one bun that they made by mistake, but I have never physically been into one. I've never bought one. I've never bought a Greggs sausage roll. People will tell me that I'm out of touch or otherwise. Listen, I love a baked good, but whenever I can, I'll go local.
Because the thing is, that local shop will be there probably 7 days a week.
But also, if I'm giving money to a company, I'd much rather give it to a local company than I would a big multiple, if I can. And particularly, say, for example, I'd much rather go to a farm shop or something where I'm buying local produce. Of course, look, if you need to buy a packaged product, a good, a condiment, a service, a tin of something, whatever it is, you're not going to get it local. So therefore, I'll go for the brand and go for the cheapest I can find it. But otherwise, I want to go local. And with things like bakeries, I want local. I don't want a big national chain.
Yes, exactly. And the flavour's better. The whole product is better. So support your local shops whenever possible. Because
we've been told. Let's turn our attention to cricket. So what have fans spotted, according to The Sun?
Well, it's that old phrase, isn't it? That's just not cricket. Because some people don't realise how cricket works, because when you're in, you're out, and when you're out, you're in. Very confusing.
Right.
But the fact is that one of the English players had walked away from the crease thinking the ball was dead. One of the Aussies came along, threw it at the stumps, and went, ha, you're out. Now, I think that's going to backfire on the Aussies for many years to come. Because whenever one of their players sort of meanders about, someone's going to wander up and go, doof, you're out. and it's going to backfire. But where it went terribly wrong in the MCC is 3 members have now been banned for the way they verbally attacked the Australian team. And there's no need for that. That's not cricket either.
So the whole thing, as the Prime Minister said, but then as others said, it's just not cricket.
Cricket, exactly.
No.
Can we move on to the Bank of England, please, James? Before we lose time.
No. Well, that's story 5 on your list.
I know, but it's just that I'm looking at the clock. And I know we're not going to get all the stories in.
All right, OK. Go to the Bank of England.
Thank you very much. I cannot... It is beyond my comprehension why the Bank of England is spending money getting terms together about gender-neutral things rather than focusing its efforts on bringing inflation down. Surely...
Well, because they're an employer like anybody else, and all employers need to work out where they stand on these things. And I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with some of the pronouncements that they're making, but every big employer needs to work out how it deals with all of these particular issues.
But at the end of the day, there's men and women. End of story. That's the end of it. That's science. And what?
Yes, but there's a difference though between biological sex and gender.
Yeah, I get where you're going, and it's a good balance point.
So any big employer, even though you may disagree with that as a viewpoint, and you may have your view, and you may say there are only 2 sexes and that's it. The thing is that is not the only viewpoint. So as an employer, you need to understand the landscape, and you need to be able to navigate, and you need to be able to come up with something which is inclusive for all your staff, because all your staff may not necessarily agree with that viewpoint that you have.
And so where do those hours come from?
Well, I think there are other things that the Bank of England should be doing. I see the point, and the point is that the Bank of England, frankly, I think they've been misguided with the policy that they pursued, but that's because they seem not to understand the difference between cost-push inflation and pull inflation.
Exactly.
And what cost-push inflation is when there is a price shock and then suddenly putting up interest rates to deal with inflation that comes from it. Not sure that's the answer. Whereas, of course, there are other ways that they could have dealt with it, with the levers of government as well. Meanwhile, let's have a quick word from the Daily Star. Fan favourite Marvel superheroes transformed into babies. What's going on?
Oh, please. This is another one of those AI stories, and the chat GPT, which I always struggle to say. And a word of warning to your viewers and listeners. If you sign up to this AI avalanche at the moment, do bear in mind that when you, James, agree to put one of these chat things on your computer, you also agree to give away your browsing history, the places that you prefer, etc. So you're giving away...
You know, you've got to be very careful with your data. You're absolutely spot on. And if you're not careful with your data, then, as you say, I think the simple answer is don't have one of those. Eric, we are pretty much out of time. If people want to find out more about you and what you get up to, where do they go?
The usual website, www.rti.fm. Thanks very much indeed, James. And look forward to seeing you soon.
Very good. Eric Wiltsher, broadcaster based in Slovakia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning here and talking, indeed going through the papers for us. And indeed recounting the things, including the 13% inflation in Slovakia. So there we go. It's not just here. Thank you very much indeed for that.